discuss about today's topic is role-based access control, that is RBAC. So what is role-based access control? Why we would need that in the Kubernetes security? It is for best practices. We can restrict the access to the uh, Kubernetes clusters and roles. Based on the roles, we can restrict who can access what cluster and what context. So based on the core security feature in Kubernetes, that helps you to control who can do what in your cluster. Okay, so the simple definition I can give you this here. Core feature in K8s security. Core feature in a security that can control who can access what in your cluster. So this is the simple definition. The beginner friendly explanations I will give you, and go through this till the end of the video, so you will get the full-fledged knowledge about how you can create it. Okay, so what is RBAC in Kubernetes? Coming to the Kubernetes, so RBAC in Kubernetes allow you to define the permissions, that is roles, and assign them to the users or service accounts, that is bindings. So first we will create the role, and the role binding will be created, that either service or binding objects. Okay, this ensures the principle of at least privilege. That means users get only the permissions they need. Suppose if the production user will get the admin privileges with the full access. Okay, for the developer we will get only the development and deployment access, but not in the production access. Likewise, we can go with the restrict the access. Okay, key factors we can see. Key factors. Okay, key factors here will come to the role. So what it contains, a set of permissions within the namespace. So set of permissions, I can say, within the namespace. So each user within the namespace, in the sense that suppose the production namespace, development namespace, and testing namespace. Likewise, we can different namespaces are there. Likewise, we can go with the role based access. Within that namespace only he can able to access. That's why we can restrict the access and cluster role. So within that cluster role, like role, but applies to the cluster wide. That means node can able to access pods and Kubernetes objects like deployment replica sets that can able to access within that cluster. Applies to cluster wide objects, cluster wide K8s objects. Okay, and it is coming to the role binding. We have role, and we have role cluster role, and we have binding object also. So binding object, it binds a role to a user or service account within a namespace. So it binds the user or service within, I can say, account, service account within the namespace. Okay, it will not allow you to the other namespaces. Only suppose if the production namespace, it will only allow the production namespace, and if it is a testing or it is a development, so within that namespace only it can limited access. It will give the based on the binding object. Then it will come to the cluster role binding. This is the cluster role binding. It will binds a cluster role to the user or service account, that is a cluster wide. This one also cluster wide. Binds a cluster role to a service or user account. I can say service or user account. Not account. Okay, So these are the key factors, key components I can say. Role, cluster role, role binding, and cluster role binding. So these are the four key components, and we can say, so for we'll try to create one example with the read-only access for the pods, the help of define a role. Okay, with the YAML file we can see. So likewise, how we can create the Kubernetes objects like pod. Likewise, we can create example API version. So since it is a RBAC, right, we need to use the RBAC authorization. Back dot authorization, we need to provide authorization dot K8s.io/v1. This is the API version which we need to use. So earlier we have created for the parts v1 or for deployments replica set apps v1. Likewise, we are not using here since it is a role based access control. We need to use this security API version, and the kind is role. So what type of object we are trying to create here is a role, and we can say there is metadata. Under metadata we need to specify the name of this pod reader. I can simply for your references. So since it is pod level access, right, we are going, so pod reader, and at namespace we can say, I can give you default namespace only for this. Then we'll go for the roles. So since it is a RBAC, we are not using any spec containers and all. We are not going to get any images, or we are not going to get any get the or pull the images from the container registry or Docker Hub. Since it is internal best practices, we are going with that. And since so we use API groups. So earlier in a short version I have given you the rules for in every rule there are three components, that is three fields available: API groups, resources, and verbs. So API groups is which is applicable for, if you are not mentioned anything, that is the default one for core objects. This is the default one for core objects like pods, deployments, it's not the deployments, replica sets and all. Okay, under resources we need to mention pods. Since it is a pod level access, we are mentioning the pods. And verbs, here we need to mention, and what access we have to give to this user pod reader account. Only we have the reader access, that means get list watch. So he doesn't want to create, or he doesn't want to edit that, or he doesn't want to delete the pods. Okay, we are only giving the get access, list access, and watch access. So these are the only access we are giving to this user, and this is the simple example which I have given. And once the file was ready, we can create with the help of below command, kubectl apply -f. So I can give you this example file name as okay, pod reader.yml. okay, pod reader.yml file I have given. So keep in mind that you need to apply this pod reader YAML file while creating -f pod reader.yml. okay, so it will create the reader access for the pods with the role, pod reader role. Okay, and next we will move on to the next topic, create the service account or binding account. So that means service account, what it will do here, read only. So we can directly create the service account with the help of kubectl create. Next I can say create a service account. So using the kubectl, create service account, read only sa.yml. So keep in mind that file names are different. Okay, this is pod reader I have given, the read only SAML file I have given SCA-en default. So we are directly creating, instead of going with the YAML file, I am directly creating this one. So you can use YAML file also, it will take some time to get, and this you will not able to understand. You can simply go through this command, it will create the default namespace with the service account read only SA. Okay, next what we can do is bind the role to the service account. That means bind the role to the service account. So for that we need to write one more YAML file, that is called read pods anything. The file name was read pods -rolebinding.m. For your reference I am giving these naming conventions, so for simple understanding. Okay, then you will go with the again API version RBAC back.authorization.k8s.io/v1. If any typos, you can kindly ignore that, and you can access or you can edit on that. Since I'm giving a bit faster, you can say this is for role binding. Okay, R capital, here B capital, that is the role binding object. You can go with the metadata again. Metadata, any typos you can simply ignore it, and you can correct it. Sorry for that inconvenience. And metadata we can give the name as read pod bindings. Okay, for naming conventions I am giving the namespace is default namespace. So even if you are not specifying the default namespace, it will be coming to the under the default namespace only. And here we need to specify, here we are giving the rules, right? Here we need to specify the subjects. Instead of rules we need to specify the subjects. So hyphen kind, what subject we are specifying here? So service account, because we are binding to the service account only, right? So we are specifying the service account. Then name was, give the service account name read only SA, what we have given here. Keep in mind this, these are the important note points while creating this service role binding. Services here, then namespace again coming to the default. Next one more is there, that is for the role reference. Role reference we can pass here. So what is the role reference here? Kind is role reference, in the sense we are creating the kind for role, right? So you need to specify the role here. Guys, this is simple example, that's why I'm creating very small and simple. And name was, so name was pod reader you have given, right? So initially what we have given here, pod reader we have given, the same way we have to give the pod reader here also. And you can use the API group. What is the API group here? RBAC dot authorization dot K8s dot io. So now this is the file, and what we have to do, so apply the role binding with the help of kubectl apply command. Next, apply the role binding. Okay, with the help of kubectl apply -f read pods role binding, right? We have given read pods role binding dot YAML. So this is the file name which we need to keep it here, and you can see if any spell or typos. Okay, it will create the binding object, and now we can test the permissions. We can test the permissions with the help of kubectl authentication K9 means can able to access list pods hyphen as equal to system. You can go through this as it is, so that you can able to identify system service account. You need to mention service account colon default namespace, then read only SA. Read only SA. Now you can see that if you have the access, it will give you the response as a yes. Above command will give you the response like yes. Okay, and so try checking the something unauthorized, like deleting a pod, if you have the access to that or not. So you can try to delete the pod. Kubectl auth can I delete pods same hyphen as equal to system colon service account default read only SA. Same concept we need to pass. So within this file you can able to delete the pod. You can try this, it will give you the answer like no. So this way you can try to check the permissions. What we have did here, so we have explained the role based access, and we see the key components, and we have given the pod reader, that is the YAML file example. And once the file was ready, we have applied that command, and next we created the service account which can identify the role reference, and then next we are applying the role binding object. So we have created the role, and we have created the role binding object which will bind to that role, and we can try to execute these commands with the help of either we can delete the pod, or either we can see the pod. Okay, get the pods. This way we can try to access the K8 security role based access control. So along with the key components which we have role, cluster role binding, and cluster role binding. So we have seen one example. So this is the read pod reader access, and we see that binding object for that pod reader, that we have created read pod binding, that is the service account which we created for that binding the pod reader, and we have created the commands for which will execute for uh, role and role bindings. Okay, for your understanding I will go with one more explanation, since we have in the development environment or testing or production environment, we will say. So I'll create one more file called developer-role.yml, so that you can easily understand content of the use API version. That is, since it is a RBAC, right, we need to use RBAC authorization, RBAC authorization dot K8s.io/v1. This is the API version which we need to use under the security feature, that is kind is what we defined earlier. So that is role. So we need to create the role first and then role binding object, then we need to execute the commands. Okay, we'll specify the role as a developer. Okay, so now instead of going with the rule, spec, we are going with the rules. So we rules which are contains the API groups, resources and verb. We already discussed about this concept. In here you can see this API groups, resources and verbs. API groups is so if you are not specifying anything within that square brackets, that is the default one for the core objects like pods, deployments and all. Suppose if you explicitly specify anything, that will come under the whatever the specified Kubernetes object you are mentioned within the square bracket, that is the API group, and resources will come into the pods, deployments, configs, secrets, etc, etc. So verbs, so which you are going to, which operation you are trying to do within that resources. Okay, under rules we can specify the API groups. Okay, so now we are not specifying anything here. We'll say that is the default group. So under resources we can say pods, so developer can able to access the pods. Under next verbs comes under what he will do with the pods. He can create the pods, so we can list the pods, he can get the pods, and he can edit the pods, edit or update, anything is fine. He can edit the pods, he can delete the pods. So we are giving all access with respect to the pods for the developer role. Okay, next we can say one more group, API groups. Here also we are not mentioned anything, so we are going with the default one, resources. So under resources we can use config map, okay. Under verbs, what he can able to do within the config maps, so he can only create the config maps that you can mention. Okay, this is the role which we created for the developer, and once the file was ready you can try to create. Next, you can create or apply with changes using below command, kubectl apply -f developer role.yml. Okay, so you can use one more also using the kubectl create -f developer role.yml. So this both are same. Okay, don't confuse with the commands. I'm giving the clear cut explanation. Now the first step is ready. We created the role and we have created the we have applied the changes. So it was created the role. Now we are going to create the role binding object for the same. So next, create the role binding object. Okay, so with the help of developer role hyphen binding.com, I can say. .yaml. So go with the API version as it is, or back authorization. Check if there are any typos. Okay, authorization K8s IO/v1. This is the API version. Kind is, you need to specify the role binding. Whatever the role we have created, for that we are creating the binding object. Metadata name you are passing as a same. You can use as a developer role binding, or depends on your or else you can use dev user. Dev user developer binding. Okay, you can use the same name as also, that is also fine for. Next we create subjects. So API version kind metadata subjects are the top level fields. Even role reference also, that is the top level field. Under subject we need to specify the kind is user. So which user you are trying to array, which user you are trying. Okay, next one is name. You can specify the name for dev user like that. Okay, and we can say API group, that you need to specify the API group, that is RBAC API group. Remove this one, and subject we have created. Okay, next we will go with the role reference. Use role reference. So here kind is role, so what we created earlier for the developer. Okay, name is what we have given here, developer. You need to take this one, and next API group same, or back authorization. You copy this command. So now role reference role binding object was ready. Then create a role binding. Next, role binding using below command. Okay, kubectl create -f. What the file name we have given here? See, copy that entire file name. So we have applied these changes. Even you can use one more option called apply also. Both are fine, and you can use instead of create, apply. So role binding object was created. So what's the next step? To view the roles in Kubernetes. Use below command, I can say. Kubectl get roles. Okay, to view the role bindings, kubectl get role bindings. Okay, we are so we are reviewing the roles and we are viewing the role bindings to view more detail about the role and run with the help of describe command over. So as usual, when we applied for the pods, right, for describing the pod with doing any changes, or if you are going with the in detail and in-depth information about the pod, so we are viewing it, right. Likewise we can use kubectl describe role, use the role name which we have created, so developer. Okay, so this is the kubectl command. We are describing the role which you want to describe and the name of the role we are passing. So likewise we can use the role binding also, role binding which you are passing, kubectl describe role binding. So is there are any typos we can keep in that, so you can verify that before going to create role binding, then specify the role binding name. Okay, here we are specifying the name as a dev user. Okay, that is the dev user. Where we have given this name, sorry, this is the name, we are mistaken. So dev user binding, so this is how you can get the roles. You can get the role bindings, you can describe the role, and if you want to check the logs, you can use the kubectl logs with the name of that role or role binding. With the help of that you can check with that. So okay, this is how you can try to practice with the actual commands, and I have given you the two examples for your better understanding. And if you have any doubts you can comment it below, so we'll clarify your doubts, and I'm here to help. And so Kubernetes in 1 hour, Kubernetes in Telugu, Kubernetes in Hindi, so local languages will not allow in the Kubernetes officially they won't allow you to communicate with the interviewers, and also they will show HD cinema for you. Okay, learn from, if you are good in basics, then you will get to know easily with the advanced topics. Okay, that's why I'm clearly giving these examples and all. Thank you all.